Act 3. Act 3 has an awful lot going on in it. Those of you, and again, I'm kind of forgetting who wants to talk, or at least who wants to get credit for talking, without having done the things. Who wants to tell me what happens in Act 3? Yes!
Well, as much as I remember, there's a lot of details, but I wrote some notes. So Ophelia meets Hamlet to give back some of his gifts that he gave to her. But he refused that he gave her any gifts at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And that he loved her. That Claudius becomes afraid of Hamlet, his acting, and he thinks that he knows something about what Claudius did. That's what I remember.
Okay. You have something to add?
Yeah, so basically at the end of scene Act 3, the queen was talking to the Hamlet.
Yeah.
Hamlet finds somebody is behind the.
Yes.
I forgot what is behind the something. And
It's called an arrest. Basically, it's a curtain.
okay, the rest. And he thought that is the king. They thought they're in one room one night, and so he kind of killed this man. But this man is with the father.
Yeah. Polonius gets stabbed in the mom's bedroom, or her chambers. There are a couple of key scenes in this act that are significant. He has a big scene with Ophelia that starts off somewhat tame and soon gets very high-pitched in emotion. Him screaming at her, "Get thee to a nunnery! Get thee to a nunnery!" And, here the notes will tell you that for the Elizabethan audience, the nunnery is literally a convent where you go to be a nun, or it can be figuratively interpreted as a brothel where the nuns would tend to congregate. So you can read that a number of different ways. Also, as we see, is a significant meeting with Gertrude, Hamlet and Gertrude, facing off. Another sort of titanic meeting that's been building. We haven't seen too much of her. She's always sort of revolving around Claudius in the earlier scenes, but this is her big scene where we're starting to get a sense of her character, how much she may or may not have known about Claudius's plot, and we start to get a sense of her as a human being and, frankly, as a parent, as a woman, and as a person who has a rich life and perspective of her own. But we get other stuff going on in Act 3. Act 3 is probably most famous, as we heard before, for, no, not that one. To be or not to be. To be or not to be. Anybody have any thoughts on this? What the hell is he talking about? Sarah.
He's trying to kind of debate with himself. Should he die, or is dying better, or is dying worse?
Yeah.
So, at first he's saying to die means to get rid of heartache and basically just get rid of all the bad things that he's experiencing, bad emotions. And then the next one, as kind of debating himself on that is no one knows what happens after death. So people just continue to like go through life because they're scared of what might happen after. So he's saying that like conscience does make cowards of us all. So basically he's saying that like people are afraid to die because of like they're thinking about like what might happen and it might be like worse or they just don't know.
Mm-hmm. That is all very true. I want to pause for a second again, slow down, and just point out that this is one long speech. A soliloquy is the word we English teachers like to toss around to make us look smart. A soliloquy, it is a extended speech of one character, supposedly to himself. You can interpret this a number of different ways. Different productions throughout the history shows Hamlet just sort of, glancing off into nowhere and thinking and just speaking those thoughts out loud. Sometimes you will have him actually engage it with the audience and do it like a give and take almost, where he's making direct eye contact with specific people and trying to speak as if he's having an actual conversation, one-sided though it may be. In movies, they frequently make it a voiceover where you will see Hamlet silent, just staring off into nowhere, and you'll hear like his voice, the actor's voice, creep in over the image so that you see him not speaking, but his voice, the implication being you were in his thoughts. Yes?
It's like the scene where a lot of people have like the skull.
That's coming up.
Oh.
Not the skull scene. What I will point out about this, however, it is one person on the stage in a very quiet moment. Now, some of the other aspects of scene or Act 3 that we've already addressed are heavy dialogue scenes. Two characters facing off in one way or the other. Multiple characters in many other scenes where they are facing off. We have very large scenes with a lot of characters on the stage when we get to the play within a play. Here, it is just Hamlet. As John pointed out, Hamlet is a very long play for Shakespeare, and Hamlet himself gets like a quarter of the entire lines of the play. A phenomenal focus on this one character. But here we have just this one character in an act that is built around many other characters as well, with him interacting with them in different degrees, but it's a change. It's a very quiet moment here, a very solitary, lonely moment here, versus in just a little while you're going to have the play within the play with, the entire cast basically on stage, flooded with extras all over the place, a big production. So you can see contrasts visually. But look at the progression of the speech itself. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep. To sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. What is going on there? What is he doing? Contemplating suicide, yes. But again, on a more formal level.
Yeah, he's more rational.
Yes. Is this something you get the sense he has thought it all out beforehand and is now just reporting his findings? I personally think Yeah, he's figuring it out right here. Look at this progression. To die, to sleep, and then he sort of stops there because sleep here means death. No more, because he's drawing out the consequences. He's considering actions, the action of killing himself, but he's looking a little further and saying, yes, but what happens on the other side? What can I expect? Now, there's the religious aspect of this, which would say that, well, okay, we know from here, to kill yourself is a sin in this Christian tradition. And perhaps he would go to hell. We know that his father, the ghost, was very concerned about his own soul because he was killed, quote, with all my sins upon my head. He did not get last rites. He did not get those formal cleansing rituals that one would expect at the end of a life. So the reality of wandering around, or perhaps just being mainlined straight down to eternal damnation, is very real for him. He is thinking of the consequences, and so frustrating his own action. Now, at this point, he is already not acting. He was told and seemed very committed to killing his uncle at the end of Act 1. He had the little interview with the ghost. He seemed very convinced of the ghost's sincerity, and he was committed. But then Act 2 comes along, and he's, not so sure. I don't know. I'll get to it. Why are you nagging? He's always doubting. He's always thinking. He's always finding some consequence to frustrate his ambition. He can say with great force, I will avenge my father. But he can't do it. The words come easily, the deeds do not. But here, you see that process behind that inaction. So it's not just he's lazy. We can see that he is frustrated from acting because he has too many thoughts. To die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. He's putting it together one step at a time. You are, as an audience, at this moment, inside his head. In an act, Act 3, that is very large, with a lot going on, with a lot of different characters and a lot of different dynamics. At this moment, you are intimately in his thoughts because he is narrating them to you. He just happens to be thinking out loud. You are in his thought process. It is not, arguably, it's not that hard for him. He is granted unfettered access to the king and queen at all times. Nobody would suspect him at first. Sarah.
Was he also like kind of thinking to himself, maybe the ghost is like the devil, and he wanted to prove that Claudius is actually guilty with his play? Like that was like important to him?
Yeah. He doubts the sincerity and the appearance of the ghost. He seemed very certain at the end of Act 1, but there's always a consequence, there's always a next step, there's always a but in everything he says. So he can take that next turn. Somebody who's a little bit more decisive, who's a little bit more focused on deeds, can call an end to all the words. He can't. The mind is infinite. He's bringing you in a very intimate moment. You're inside his mind, and it is enormous. There's a reason that this is the most famous monologue of this play, soliloquy. People around the world obviously know this. And it is in great contrast to the play within a play, the Mousetrap. There's a lot of stuff going on. It's a lot of drama. There are a lot of characters on the stage at the same time. They're all doing different things. They're all spying on one another. But that's enormous. Here, it's the one character just trying to work something out. And it's so, so intimate. He doesn't know where he's going. He doesn't know what to expect. He is concerned about the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. He can't see the next step beyond that. Obviously, this is somebody who's always dwelling on the next step. What is the consequence? What happens after this? I do this. What happens after that? What can I expect? What should I do following that? He's always trying to figure these things out, and he can't when it comes to death. No one can. No traveler returns. Now here, I will recall to you that in this age of the Renaissance, this period of history is also largely referred to by many as the age of discovery, because at this time in history, Europeans were finding this little piggy bank called North and South America. Magellan sails around the world. We were doing amazing things all over the world as a species. The human species was accomplishing great, great things through the power of their ingenuity and their own guts. Their ability to be travelers, to be adventurers, can conquer the planet. But the human mind is more vast. The human mind, the human consciousness is infinite. And by now, they have circled the world. That's no longer infinite. The mysteries have been stripped away. But they understand their own limitations are still, not with all the big crowds, but with the interior human mind.